the food food infrastructure opportunities initiative. Can everybody see my slides? Good. Okay, great. So I also like to say the Food Systems Infrastructure Opportunities Initiative is kind of a mouthful, right? So I just say, let's talk food systems. And welcome for those of us who are just joining in the Opportunities Initiative. Let me recap for those who just joined us where we are within the initiative. So a little bit of the backstory. We are talking about food systems infrastructure, which more or less means how we gather together our local food and aggregate it, cut, wash, pack it, and distribute it, and how we get it to folks, to consumers, to institutions, to other entities, right? You know, the idea of a food hub keeps coming up year after year. It's you know, something that I think the USDA has been talking about for at least a solid decade, right? And the definition of a food hub is a very loose and moving target, but it's a facility that facilitates, aggregates, stores, processes, and distributes food locally. And long story short is that back in 2016, the Montgomery County Food Council started really looking at these food hub ideas by contracting a consultant, Cultivate Ventures. We did a food hub feasibility study. The long and short of it was back in 2016 and to 2018, in that time frame, it was determined that, okay, what we're going to do is actually, instead of doing the food hub facility at this moment, we are going to build capacity to produce more food. A programmatic response was then initiated. Folks have been working on building that capacity, and now finally we are there. We are at the point where we're talking very seriously about a food hub or other similar facility. And in 2022, there's just a focus on increasing food resiliency and emergency preparedness for myriad reasons. Myriad experts tell us that, you know, we need to increase regional food aggregation and processing and distribution infrastructure. Most noteworthy examples of this are FAO, USDA, creating a big programmatic response. And of course, we know that this is very timely for multiple reasons, not the least of which are fertilizer shortages, you know, sea level, you know, basically coastal damage may impact food ports, droughts out west. So in other words, it's time to really get serious about increasing our food resilience capacity in the area by increasing our food infrastructure. So we've been doing a series of tours and educational opportunities. One of the first ones we went to was 4P Foods, which is a food hub in Warrenton. It's led by Tom McDougall, amazing CEO of this facility. And they basically just started with one walk-in cooler in Culpeper, and it was funded by an Eagle Bank loan, and Tom literally put up his condo as collateral. I think he said it was about $150,000. So they got their modest start. Now they do CSA boxes for customers, institutional sales to the 3 surrounding counties. They also do charity deliveries, for example, food banks and food as medicine programs. And they do sales to other entities as well, actually. And they source from 600 to over 1,000 farmers of all sizes. They also source from other food hubs within the Eastern Food Hub Collaborative, so other food sources or other food hubs. And they also do traditional sources to get those few remaining products that basically fulfill the entire need for all the to fill the full grocery bag. So they are a large food hub doing amazing work. In terms of financing, what was interesting about 4P Foods is that there are many Tom talks about many spokes, many wheels. In other words, not economies of scale, but he talks about economies of collaboration to be financially viable. So everyone working together can fulfill that niche. He also talks about patient capital. So that we basically can finance, and the financing needs to expect a 20-year investment before return. And to go with it, to talk about his foundation sources for a moment of funding, he sought some foundation sources of funding, and it took 1.5 years to figure out how to get funded through a charity legally. And we can talk more about this in the future, but long story short, they figured out that one foundation did a C3 PRA investment for charitable impact. The other foundation did an ERG, expenditure responsibility grant. And so they also, right, okay, so that was an example of a large food hub. An example of a small food hub is Frederick Fresh. It's a refrigerated area in a basically large historic barn where they have an online platform. Customers order. Frederick Fresh takes a percentage of the sales. A volunteer picks up from farms. Farms just drop their product off in a cooler at the historic barn at a youth camp. Here you see it pictured. It's just that simple. The camp maintains the physical space, and there's a farmer volunteer that coordinates and packs the CSA boxes and just gets a discount. So a percentage of their sales, they get a discount on the percentage of their sales to go to Frederick Fresh. So there's an example of a very small food aggregation project. We've also toured Crossroads Community Kitchen, which is an amazing example of a nonprofit run shared kitchen space. Businesses use their commercial kitchen for their small food businesses, and they pay by the hour, very important for small businesses. This Crossroads Community Kitchen offers valuable business assistance services for new food businesses, helps them figure out how to be legally compliant, get off the ground. And one thing about Crossroads is that they were really interested in streamlining sourcing from local raw ingredients, so that all of their businesses working together can get raw ingredients. And it's interesting because perhaps a food hub project could also be a source for somewhere like Crossroads Community Kitchen and all our other shared kitchen spaces. We have also toured Sandy Springs Farm, and pictured here is the amazing farmer Tom Farquhar. And yes, that is also Maryland State Delegate Laura Charkoudian pictured on the ladder looking at the historic barn. But one of the things that was really interesting to come out of this farm tour is that Tom is very interested in selling to Montgomery County Public Schools. And he has been going through the GAP certification process to do so. But a huge barrier for farmers has been that they have to get GAP certified in order to sell to the county. So perhaps a local food aggregation unit can help address this issue. Also, we talked about any aggregation distribution facility will have to think very hard about the scale of equipment needed at the aggregation facility. For example, size, if you're going to buy a potato slicer, for example, how big is it going to be financially viable? So we're going to look at some future food hubs to explore. Dreaming Out Loud, in which we've met with Chris, and I wanted to point out Chris runs Dreaming Out Loud, is another food hub in DC. He has said that one of the big tips at a new food hub would be to ensure that you have key institutional buyers that are engaged at the start. We're also going to be touring Shared Kitchen Space La Cocina, Virginia, and Farmland Kitchen. And there's a lot of regional collaboration potential through Eastern Food Hub Collaborative, Washington Metropolitan Council of Governments, and Maryland Food Resiliency Council, all of whom have their own projects going on. Also, I wanted to just share quickly the poll results. We asked folks last month what the most important elements of the food hub effort in the area would be. And of course, no surprise, folks think that aggregating and distributing products is most important, but also very important is shared kitchen space, but only for cut, wash, pack type assembly, not for creating real storage, real shelf stable products, etc. Retail space of the hub, and then services to participating farmers, particularly GAP certification, etc. So thank you very much. That's a whirlwind recap of the food infrastructure series so far, and I shall turn it back over to Esther. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Lorianne. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Lorianne directly. And next up, we are going to introduce Abby Long from the USDA's Local and Regional Foods Division of the Agricultural Marketing Service. Okay.
Some thanks, Esther. Good morning, everyone. This was a great overview, Lorianne. Thank you. you covered a lot of things that I now don't need to talk about. I don't need to have the, if you've seen a food hub, you've only seen one food hub conversation. It seems like y'all understand what that's like. So good morning, everyone. My name's Abby Long. I am a researcher in AMS's local and regional foods division. I have worked across local and regional food systems throughout my career prior to USDA, mostly in aggregation and distribution spaces. This culminated in me ultimately co-founding a food hub in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and running it through the initial startup phases till it got stable enough that it didn't need its founding operating manager, and I wandered off to grad school. But I'm still really passionate about figuring out how to make food hubs work and how to make local food aggregation and distribution happen. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the federal funding opportunities that can provide pathways to help food hubs get started. In doing so, I'm going to talk largely about AMS grants, which is more of my area of expertise, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about our department-wide food systems transformation work, which includes opportunities through rural development. Never worked in RD, I do not formally represent them, but I think it's really important to discuss some of those opportunities, and I can point you towards places to get a little more information on those. So as I mentioned, this will be a high-level overview. If you've seen one food hub, you've only seen one food hub. Let's see. Oh, there we go. I was looking at the wrong screen. Okay, so within AMS, our goal is to create more and better markets for agricultural products across the United States. Within local and regional food systems, that means that we participate in these 5 activities. In my day-to-day role, I'm more research, data, and TA, but I'll talk about funding today, but just putting it out there that I am also a resource for technical assistance, and my email will be at the end of this presentation. So within AMS, we have many, many grant opportunities. 3 very popular and familiar programs are the Farmers Market Promotion Program, the Local Food Promotion Program, and our Regional Food System Partnerships. I'm not going to discuss FMPP today, though if your food hub is really closely connected to a farmer's market, say maybe you use it as a pickup location, there could be some creative opportunities for funding there, but I'm going to focus mostly on LFPP and RFSP today. And before I dig into these, the requests for proposals for these are closed for the 2022 year. Wrap that up. So as we talk through this, keep this in mind for next year. Something I highly recommend if you're interested in either of these programs is looking at prior RFPs. Because these are so well established, they don't change a ton year to year at this point. So you can do a lot of pre-work and set yourself up to be ready for those 4 to 6 week open application periods. So LFPP focuses on projects that are aimed at developing and coordinating local and regional food activities within specific areas at the point of, the intermediary, the person connecting a producer to a consumer, so that there's hopefully increased access to local and regionally produced products in your area. These grants are open to eligible entities that are engaged in those classic activities we see food hubs doing: processing, distributing, and aggregating or storing local or regionally produced products. And with this program, there is a 25% match required. So something I'll point out throughout this presentation and want to highlight is that, as you saw, Tom with 4P Foods do, and a lot of other food hubs, being creative is key to make these funding opportunities work for you. So I like to highlight the match as sort of an opportunity. Say you're already considering making a major investment. In our case, when I was running a food hub, we needed to purchase a 35-foot straight refrigerated truck. That was going to cost us about $25,000. That was our match. We used that as our match. We were going to buy that truck anyway, and then we procured the LFPP grant to add a little extra funding there and make sure that investment we were going to make anyway was successful. So you can get creative here and pursue plans you already have, and then just, the sweetener is the rest of the LFPP grant. So RFSP, again, this is an an opportunity for creativity. The RFSPs are really focused on partnerships that bring public and private resources together to develop the local and regional food systems at that systems level, like generate institutional structure and support for local and regional food systems. So you can do a planning, a design, an implementation, or a farm to institution grant here. But the key and where things get interesting is the eligible entities. So first you have to have a partnership, public-private partnership. But the eligible entities here are going to be farmer and rancher cooperatives, producer networks, food policy councils. So while a single privately held LLC would not be a fit for this, if you have a cooperative producer-based structure to the private entity, say you have a food hub that is a co-op, that would be an amazing opportunity for that group of producers to connect with their local or state agencies, universities, form a partnership that can sort of support the whole system. And again, a 25% match is required here. So pivoting now to our food systems transformation framework. This was announced this past summer. It is $4 billion of American Rescue Plan funding that was invested in these 4 focus areas. We need the food system of the future to be fair, competitive, the benefits more well distributed across communities, and resilient, as Lorianne spoke to. Resilience was clearly an issue during the pandemic, and with increasing pressures of climate change, we're really focused on supporting a more diffuse food system network across the country. So here we're again focused on aggregation and distribution, the yellow pillar right there. And the goal with a lot of the middle of the supply chain focus in the food systems transformation is that, we acknowledge there's significant concentration in the processing, aggregation, and distribution spaces. This reduces market opportunities for producers. There aren't as many places where you can reasonably sell your products. So the goal with this investment is in expanding access to financing opportunities for those infrastructure pieces at that bottleneck around processing, aggregation, and distribution. And now, as you can see, my slides have changed a little. This is where I have stolen some resources from my rural development colleagues, and these are largely rural development programs. But again, any questions that I can't answer during this session, I will find an answer for you. So really exciting new program through the food systems transformation activities is this food supply chain guaranteed loan program. These are 90% loan guarantees up to $40 million for independent entities working in the middle of the supply chain. Some really, really large entities are not eligible for these funds. They wanted to make sure that small and mid-size folks in this space could access these funds. The applications for this are currently open and available until they're fully expended. If you are already engaging with one RD as a lender, then all of those lenders are automatically approved to offer these funds. And if you're not a lender, if you are potentially a food hub operator or someone who would like to access these funds, we highly recommend you go talk to your financial institution to see if they offer this, see if they're aware that it's an option, and if they might want to offer it. Also highly recommend engaging with your state rural development office. Unlike AMS, they have a significant presence on the ground, so you can go into an office and speak with someone that can provide guidance on how to access these programs. But I'll leave it there for now because I'm so glad we have a CDFI person on the call. I am not a financial products expert, but these are available. They're a great opportunity. They're pretty new and groundbreaking compared to other work we've done before. Also upcoming, we're looking at some funding going into food supply chain infrastructure broadly. This is very much in development. Don't have a lot of information to share yet, but just know there is that bucket of funds sitting there that over the course of the next year will ultimately become available to support infrastructure. If you've heard about all of the money going into meat and poultry processing, this is sort of an equivalent program to match that for those working outside of meat and poultry processing. More information to come on that. If you go to the American Rescue Plan website, then they'll post more information there when it's available. So as I mentioned earlier, the key here, even if you're not doing an RFSP, even if you're doing an LFPP or you're pursuing a guaranteed loan, partnerships are essential. Whether you're going to a financial institution or putting in a grant application, strong projects that are very clearly defined, very targeted, well-written applications are beneficial, and making sure you've already got access to whatever either capital that your financial institution would like you to have on hand or your matching funds, already having that in hand is really essential. It's hard to scramble and, convince folks to share $25,000 worth of, in-kind donations or whatever the case may be. So pre-planning is very essential for success here. And a lot of that comes down to partnerships and being engaged with other folks working in this space in your community, crowdsourcing ideas for creatively using the funding if you do access it. And yet again, as 4P shows, looking outside of these options is also very important. There's an increasing movement towards, investors and folks in philanthropic spaces being interested in providing, potentially cash, but also technical assistance, or just doing some connecting pieces between maybe you and your financial institution. So being creative, really key. Glad to answer questions about specific ideas. It's also always a great idea to reach out to the grants division if you have questions about what funds can and can't be used for within AMS specifically. And finally, as I wrap up, I always like to show this. It's an oldie but a goodie. It was updated last year and some things have changed. But what I've talked about today is a small sliver of all of the things that are done across USDA. Within aggregation and distribution, FSA also has a few programs. The Farm Service Agency, recommend looking at them. Again, they also have offices on the ground in your state. So potentially very accessible depending on if you're near one of those. But just want to note that we do a lot of work in this space. There are a lot of opportunities here. If you're not sure where to start or what might be a good fit, reach out to me and I or one of my colleagues can point you in the right direction. So, and again, as I knew I was going to find somewhere to shoehorn this in there. Also, we at AMS recently invested $400 million in the creation of regional food business centers. The request for proposals or applications is out for this right now. We'll be reviewing those as the calendar year wraps up. But depending on where these end up located, these can really support, small and mid-sized food and farm businesses, and maybe should be a great resource to point anybody operating a food hub towards additional resources, community partners, etc. So keep an eye out for these as those announcements come out early next year. So thank you all for your time. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. If you have any questions, please let me know. Hopefully I didn't fly through that too horribly fast. And my email address is here. I'll also type it in the chat so I can see you all. I'm going to unshare my screen, but thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Abby, for your presentation. And like she said, she's going to put her email in the chat. So if you have any questions for her, please feel free to reach out to her directly. And then next up, we have Steve McHenry, the Executive Director of MARBIDCO. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. Again, my name is Steve McHenry. I've served as Executive Director of the Maryland Agricultural and Resource-Based Industry Development Corporation for nearly 16 years now. It's hard to believe that it has been that long, but let me see if I can get my screen share working. There we go. So I want to just take a couple of minutes to talk about Maryland agriculture and agriculture in Montgomery County, and then talk for a minute about MARBIDCO, and then a program that we have coming up related to local farm food aggregation grants, which I think will be of interest to this group. So just very briefly, I don't know how many folks on the audience have a understanding of Maryland's agricultural sector. We have a pretty diverse agriculture in Maryland, everything from dairy and beef and vegetables and grain, row crops, and especially poultry. The poultry sector is Maryland's largest agricultural sector, with the chicken farms on the Eastern Shore comprising a large percentage of the 48% poultry and eggs you see here in the pie chart. USDA does a census of agriculture every 5 years, and this is from the 2017 census. And the census was recently done for 2022. Those results will be announced next year. But I mentioned the importance of poultry because you'll see grain there and oil seeds at 23%. And the chickens eat a lot of corn, soybeans, and some wheat and barley and other small grains. So pretty important that we have the chicken industry here in Maryland. Moving on then to another look at Maryland agriculture. We have just under 12,500 farms today. Of course, the number of farms has been decreasing over several years. About 2 million acres in agriculture. Maryland has 6.2 million acres, just to give you some context. So about a third of the land is in agriculture, but if you add in privately owned forest land, about half the state's land area is still privately owned rural working land. So we think of Maryland as being an urban state, but half the state is still in food and fiber production. Just in terms of demographics, it traditionally was a male-dominated industry, but the number of female farmers is growing significantly. Over the last 2 or 3 decades, we're up to about 30% of the principal farm producers in Maryland being women. And in terms of all farmers, we have about 21,000 farmers statewide. And you can see there the breakdown of just under 40% are women farmers. One statistic that's of particular importance to us is the average age of the Maryland farmer, 57 years old. We have had an aging rural workforce and farm ownership and management, which has been a concern. The trend has been going up with every census. So we're concerned about the next generation of folks getting into agriculture or staying in agriculture. And the other statistic that's kind of interesting is the average age of the beginning farmer in Maryland is 45 years old. So we actually have mid-career people getting into agriculture, which is very exciting. Just to comment very briefly on some farmland statistics. The average farm size in Maryland is 160 acres, which is a little larger than the average farm size in Montgomery County at 117 acres. And there has been some fragmentation of farmland across the state in terms of its ownership. You can see here that 55% of Maryland's farms are under 50 acres in size, which is something that we've been focusing on as well. We have relatively few very large farms in Maryland, and then a good number of farms in the 50 to 500 acre range. In terms of Montgomery County, more specifically, as of the last census, you can see there are 558 farms in the county, covering just over 65,000 acres. You can see there that the value of the product sold was approaching $43 million. You see there that grain and oilseed crops are at the top of the list, followed by the nursery greenhouse industry. Livestock related products come in at just under $5 million, with vegetables, fruits and berries, and hay and other crops after that. The other thing I want to just very briefly point out is the average age of farmers in Montgomery County. Just 9% of the farmers in the county are under the age of 35, whereas 33% are over the age of 35. So this is, obviously something that could be of concern to you. The other thing that's of interest is nearly half of the farmers in the county are women. So that's just a little bit about agriculture in Maryland and in Montgomery County more specifically. So I thought then I should talk just very briefly about what MARBIDCO is for those of you that may not be familiar with us. We are essentially the state's agricultural finance agency. We were established a little over 16 years ago. We've been operating for about 15 and a half years. And we were set up really to help deal with this issue of providing capital and credit, particularly to young and beginning farmers and farmers diversifying their farm operations to keep them more viable and sustainable. We're also we're tasked to help facilitate with rural land preservation. So as a financial and intermediate organization, we have some capability in that area as well. We're set up as a quasi-public corporation, which gives us some ability to be nimble and work, relatively quickly, sort of at the speed of business rather than trying to be not too overly bureaucratic in what we do. We can assist farm operations of really any size. You just have to have $1,000 in sales annually to qualify as a farm for MARBIDCO. And we funded something over 1,100 projects over the last 15 years, and more than half of them have helped young and beginning farmers. Just to also provide a frame of reference, we're really set up to be a commercial lender. We have a number of revolving loan programs, and I thought this might be useful to the audience to see where we fit in to the small business financing arena. Our focus is in food production and processing. So you can see there anything dealing with the production of food and fiber products, and then the primary processing of those food and fiber products, including up to the point of aggregation and storage. And then other economic development finance programs would then potentially come into play when you're talking about retail business, food distribution, and that sort of thing. So we work sort of in tandem with USDA's loan programs, the Farm Service Agency principally, but we've also worked with rural development and the NRCS and helping them do projects that help support Maryland agriculture. And then as you get into the retail sector, you have a number of other programs, including a new Montgomery County small business loan program, for example, that might help on the retail side. So just very quickly looking at the major funding divisions, basically our programs are designed around where the money comes from to support them. Again, we're a financial intermediary organization, so we're reliant on generating revenue from various sources for particular purposes. And as I mentioned, we're primarily a lender. We have loans that we make with our funds, and then we have other programs that where, for example, we could make unsecured loans, taking higher credit risk with funds provided by other agencies. For example, we've stood up 2 oyster farming programs and funded over 90 oyster farm projects in the state using funds from DNR and the federal government, for example. We have a few small grants that we make, targeted especially at urban agriculture and small farms. But, and we also have some specialty grant programs. And this is the area that I'm going to focus on today with the rest of my talk, in that thanks to the efforts of Delegate Laura Charkoudian and Senator Katie Fry-Hester, we have a source of funding for 5 years to fund the Certified Local Farm Enterprise Grant Program. And just a little background on this program was envisioned to help support small and mid-sized farms to get greater access to wholesale and institutional markets. So a lot of emerging vegetable and fruit operations that have been able to sell at retail markets, higher value markets in urban areas, and farm stands and things of that sort. But small farmers have had a difficult time getting their products into wholesale and institutional markets. And that's where the whole concept of aggregation comes into play, where you would combine the production of a number of small farms, enable them to have sufficient supply to be able to serve wholesale and institutional markets. So legislation was passed in 2020. The legislation was initially vetoed, and so it had a delayed effect. So it's been in place for just over a year now. And how the program works is the state is trying to support the development of an infrastructure so that the aggregation of small and mid-sized farmer demand could be directly supported by the state's procurement system. So under the recent law, state agencies are now required to try to procure 20% of the food that they purchase from certified local farm enterprises. So what is a certified local farm enterprise? Well, Maryland farmers have the most stringent environmental requirements in the country. They have very significant stewardship requirements that they must follow under law. And so the program was designed so that Maryland farmers, when they're submitting their annual plans to the Maryland Department of Agriculture, could indicate that they want to become a certified local farm enterprise for purposes of being placed on a directory or a list that wholesale and institutional buyers could have access to. And so MDA is now maintaining that list. There's more than 80 farmers that have signed up to be certified local farm enterprises. And so this is a significant opportunity for smaller farm operations to have perhaps some of their excess supply of product, maybe some value-added products, getting into the food chain in terms of what is being purchased by state institutions and hopefully other public institutions like local school systems, et cetera. The school systems are not under this requirement. Right now, it's just the state agencies and the state universities. But hopefully the infrastructure that's being developed will be utilized by many public agencies as well as hospitals, et cetera. So as part of this whole effort, MARBIDCO has been provided $435,000 a year for a 5-year period to stand up what we call the Local Farm Enterprise Food Aggregation Grant Program. And again, this program is designed to support wholesale and institutional market demand. We have had 2 rounds of funding over the last year and a half or so. We've approved 5 projects thus far. 4 of them were for small farmer-led projects. And then we've had 1 larger public sector project that was recently approved involving the Caroline County government, Caroline County schools, was supported by the Midshore Regional Council. And I believe the Cecil County school system is also going to be providing product to the aggregation efforts that are being facilitated by Caroline County. And so we have, we're about to launch the 3rd round of the Local Farm Enterprise Food Aggregation Grant Program on November 15th. So we wanted you to be aware of that. The application forms will be available on our website on November 15th. The deadline for applications to be received is January 31st, 2023. We have about $650,000 available in the upcoming round. Again, the focus is on supporting certified local farm enterprises with these aggregation projects. There's going to be 2 tiers of applicants, either smaller scale farm cooperative projects could be funded, or what we call larger public sector institution projects involving local governments, school systems, et cetera. So in terms of the smaller scale aggregation projects, we'll have grants available between $25,000 and $100,000. At least 4 certified local farm enterprises must be involved in the application. Applicants can be either a farmer cooperative, legally organized cooperative, or a formally organized organization such as an LLC involving, again, at least 4 certified local farm enterprises. There must be a 20% match of the grants that are requested, and up to 20% of the funds that we provide can be used as working capital. The rest will be used to purchase tangible equipment and capital assets. There must also be a commitment from a wholesale or institutional buyer as part of the application. So again, we're really trying to build the infrastructure to support the wholesale and institutional markets. And on the larger scale side, again, this is targeted to public entities such as county governments, municipalities, community colleges, university, county school system, or rural regional council. Again, there must be at least 4 certified local farmers identified in the project. Again, 20% match required. And we're expecting, because these are larger grants of between $150,000 and $400,000, that there would probably be an investment by 1 or more other agencies involved in funding these larger projects. Eligible items can include all kinds of hardware: refrigeration, storage, handling equipment, including forklifts and dollies, processing equipment, washing stations, equipping, commercial kitchen, other kinds of processing facilities, refrigerated trucks. And again, we'll allow up to 20% to be used as working capital for whatever kinds of labor and other non-capital related expenses you might have. What we're not going to be able to fund under this program is any kind of regular, planting and harvest equipment, equipment purchased prior to January 31st, 2023, attorney's fees, and other items not directly related to the aggregation project. And my colleague, Stacy Kavasik, who's attending today, will be the point of contact. So here is her contact information. And I think that covers everything I planned to say, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Steve. Right now, we're going to pause and take any questions from our last 2 presenters. So if you have any questions, please feel free to either put them in the chat or raise your hand and we can go in order. Yeah, Mark, go ahead.
I guess this is for, I think it's more for Steve than the other presenter. I'm curious, I got tons of questions. My name's Mark Grossman. I run a small mixed vegetable farm called Farm at Our House. And I've worked with MARBIDCO. It's been an incredible resource. Great work. It's really helped us expand. You mentioned the restrictive regulations in Maryland, and one of the things I've come up against regularly is the nutrient management plans. And as an organic farmer who essentially is using leaves as an input, the amount of time that I'm asked to put into that management plan is really incredible. And I'm curious if you could speak to why there seems to be like a one-size-fits-all approach to this.
Well, again, I'm not with the Department of Agriculture, so I don't have any role in the regulation of agricultural operations. Obviously, the nutrient management requirements are in place to help farmers better manage their nutrient inputs so that nutrients aren't flowing into the tributaries and the Chesapeake Bay. So this is all about improving water quality and the health of Chesapeake Bay. I would encourage you to reach out to the Office of Resource Conservation at MDA and see if there's anything that could be done on their end to make compliance with the state's nutrient management requirements easier for smaller operations.
Thanks.
Anyone else have any questions for either Abby or Steve? Nope. Don't want to miss anyone. Okay. Awesome. We are going to move on to our next presenter, Alison Powers. And if you have any questions, please feel free to still put them in the chat. We can go back to them at the end. Alison Powers, she is the Director of Economic Opportunities at Capital Impact Partners.
Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Thumbs up. All right. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Alison Powers. I'm the Director of Economic Opportunities at Capital Impact Partners, which is a CDFI, a community development financial institution that is headquartered in the DMV, but we work nationally. Our primary focuses are food, affordable housing, aging, cooperative development, and education. Last year, we became part of this larger Momentous Capital family, which includes CDC Small Business Finance. They are one of the largest SBA lenders in the country. We're both 40-year-old organizations that complement each other. We tend to do larger real estate deals, and they are a small business lender. And we are both focused on racial justice and have deep roots in the communities we serve. So just a bit about us and our background in food. Our vision around food is really focused on opportunity and wealth creation through entrepreneurship and food access. That really complements the mission of Nourish DC, which I'm going to be talking a little bit more about today after I talk about kind of what is a CDFI and what are the sorts of tools we can provide. Capital Impact does have extensive experience managing food programs, including the California FreshWorks Fund and the Michigan Good Food Fund. And so we're really building on this expertise and experience, thinking about how to better serve the DMV. So just a little bit about what is a CDFI, or Community Development Financial Institution. A CDFI can come in many forms, but we are all mission driven and focus on economic opportunity. CDFIs were formed in the 1990s to revitalize communities through a lot of different tools, including equity investments, capital grants, loans, and technical assistance. Were originally formed to impact communities where banks were not operating or lending, whether that's cities, rural areas. There's lots of CDFIs that serve Native communities on reservations. Really what sets us CDFIs apart is the technical assistance and programmatic work that are really at the root of what we do. It's a more holistic approach to capital. For example, I am on the programs team of our organization, and so we manage programs like Nourish DC, which is food focused, or the Equitable Development Initiative that trains real estate developers of color to really have a seat at the table during city planning and larger real estate deals. We do things like market research, build relationships with local government, influence policy, technical assistance, deploy grants, and work closely with the lending team to develop new products that meet community needs. There are more than 1,300 CDFIs nationally. Our kind of umbrella organization is the Opportunity Finance Network, which is actually having their national conference today. I'm leaving for New York in a few hours. So capital deployment in CDFIs, what does that look like? CDFIs, like I said, are mission-driven lenders that can use all different sorts of capital, whether that is, federal, state, local funding, philanthropic funding, to make targeted investments. There are several tools that are available to CDFIs through the government. One you've probably heard of is the Healthy Food Financing Initiative, or HIFI. These are grants to CDFIs that are working with food institutions or food businesses, and they can be used for financial products, loan loss reserves, capital reserves, development services. There's kind of a whole host of things, and CDFIs will apply directly for HIFI funds and describe what they want the funding for. There's also new markets tax credits, which you probably have heard about. They are large, complicated instruments usually used for larger real estate transactions, but really meant to encourage economic opportunity and community development. We can also apply for funds from the CDFI program or grants from CDFI, kind of the larger CDFI pool of funding for financial and technical assistance. And so all of these, financing options and more for, there's ones for housing and for all sorts of different tools. All this financing can flow through CDFIs and be layered with city, state, federal funds or philanthropic dollars to kind of make the transaction work. Just to give an example, we're currently underwriting a grocery store in Indian Head, Maryland. And the margins are going to be pretty challenging in the store. I mean, we all know that grocery can be generally challenging, but luckily there is town funding, county money, Maryland state money, and it's also subsidized through new markets tax credits. So, this subsidy is really a key, and CDFIs are really used to these complicated capital stacks and, are really set up to manage this not only during the financing, but also complying with the ongoing regulations and monitoring. So CDFIs are really focused on multiple outcomes. This is how we think about, long-term impact. There's obviously the community level where we want to see outcomes that have to do with the social determinant of health, which are all interconnected like food, education, housing, small business, economic opportunity, neighborhood stabilization. But there's also the borrower level outcomes, like, property and asset ownership, building wealth creation. We know that these are all tools for individuals in community to help build wealth and bridge the racial wealth gap, since we are focused on entrepreneurs of color. Our programmatic work, which I talked about before, can also help us think holistically about these different outcomes and what else the community or the borrower needs to be successful. Just to reiterate that financing is not the only tool that CDFIs have. So just wanted to point out that there's lots of different ways that CDFIs work with local government. There's a lot of mission alignment there. I think especially around food justice and affordable housing. Sometimes they can come to us for guidance. Sometimes we go to them for guidance. Again, we do a lot of policy work and also, kind of leveraging their capital tools and partnering on programmatic initiatives. And I think Nourish DC, which we'll talk about next, is a great example of this. There's just a natural synergy between local government and CDFIs, especially those that do really in-depth place-based work. So this is a little bit of an overview on capital impacts, debt financing for retailers or distribution systems. We tend to do larger, at least for CDFIs, larger deals between $1 and $8 million. Examples of the type of transactions we would do would be grocery stores, food hubs, food incubators, commercial kitchens. We have a wide range of funding, including pre-development, acquisition, construction, renovation, refinancing. And like I said before, we also apply every year for healthy food financing or HIFI money or new markets tax credits allocation. So we usually have lots of different tools that we can bring to the table and also try to raise money from foundations to have some flexible capital in the mix. We also actually have, debt is not the only financing tool we have. We're currently launching a new investment tool. It's a preferred equity tool for growing businesses and actually a regional food hub. I don't think I can announce it yet, but I'll just say a regional food hub in our area is one of our first investments. So there's lots of kind of new and exciting ways, and really thinking about different ways that we can, provide tools for the growth of food businesses, and what are the different forms that can take, whether it's debt or equity or sometimes grants. So now I'm going to talk a bit about Nourish DC, which is a program that we launched a year ago in October 2021. So we're rounding our kind of first year in Nourish. This is a DC-based program, but I thought it would be kind of interesting overview for the group because a lot of our collaborative partners work kind of across the boundaries of the city. The purpose of Nourish DC is to support the development of a robust ecosystem of locally owned food businesses, especially neighborhoods underserved by grocery. And I think those of you who are familiar with DC know that that's, you know, wards 5, 7, and 8, especially wards 7 and 8. And it's also to support economic and prosperity and job creation. So there's kind of a dual focus on both economic opportunity and food access. We are focused on locally owned food businesses that are owned or led by people of color. And this is just a little bit about the structure of Nourish. The DC government, specifically DEMPED, which is the Office for the Deputy Mayor of Local and Economic Development. I think I have that acronym right. They are our anchor funder, and we also have additional funding from the Bainham Family Foundation, Morningstar Foundation, but the funding kind of flows through us as the fund manager, and we have a lot of different CDFI and technical assistance partners, probably some of which you all are familiar with, including the Washington Area Community Investment Fund, or WACIF, the Latino Economic Development Center, or LEDC, Dreaming Out Loud, Eats Place, and also we have to update this slide, City First Enterprises, who's a new partner, and as well as CDC Small Business Finance, who's our partner through this momentous capital merger. We all play different roles in the ecosystem. Working as a collaborative is kind of our special sauce because we're thinking about how can we collectively serve folks, whether that's through capital needs or technical assistance or grants, and how do we have an impact on the larger ecosystem. So there are really 3 prongs to what we can offer through Nourish DC. One is a range of financial products and loans, and we've deployed over $14 million in the first year. The second is technical assistance, through workshops or trainings or webinars. And the third is grants. And when we think about the Nourish food chain, the food value chain, it's very kind of holistic. We see it as a lot of different types of businesses, whether those are farmers markets or urban farms or cooperatives or restaurants or caterers. We think about this pretty broadly. And I just wanted to touch a little more on these 3 prongs that we serve through Nourish. We, can offer a really wide variety of financing tools because we're all working together. We could do a $1,000 loan to a food truck or an $8 million loan to a grocery store. All the collaborative partners have their own kind of specific financing parameters, but we can cover a pretty wide range. And I just wanted to point out that all of our CDFI partners, and as well as our technical assistance partner, Dreaming Out Loud, are already working in Montgomery County and beyond, Prince George's County and beyond. And so these tools are available not only to DC. I mean, we have some subsidy through Nourish DC, but they're available to the wider DMV, and a lot of our partners like LEDC are kind of going up into Baltimore as well. Our partners offer a really wide range of technical assistance. A lot of them have food cohorts or accelerators specifically for food businesses. I think we talked before about Dreaming Out Loud and how they're thinking a lot about procurement. They're working with a lot of regional Black-owned farms and kind of trying to think about, the food ecosystem and institutional needs. We do also offer grants. In 2021, we offered over $500,000 in grants. All of the grants went to businesses in wards 5, 7, and 8. 9 out of 10 were businesses owned by people of color, and 7 out of 10 were owned by women. We got 185 applications, so there's clearly a huge need. These are some of our grantees to the left is Flavorture, which is a catering company that is opening now their own restaurant. The middle is 3 Part Harmony Farms in Ward 5, and this is a hoop house they bought to extend their growing season. And on the right is Well Found Foods. They are delivering food all over the city and brought this van with their grant. And we are launching our second round of Nourish DC grants on Wednesday, the 26th, next week. And that's going to be $500,000 that's funded through the city and the Bainham Family Foundation. So just kind of just to have a last slide here. This is my note. I, was doing these slides yesterday and just thinking a little bit about what were some of the opportunities and challenges. No, by no means not an exhaustive list, but just some of my 2 cents here. I just do think that there is a big opportunity because we have this robust network of CDFIs that work in the wider DMV area and really want to work more in Maryland counties. Like we've all talked about today, there's such a huge emphasis on regional food systems. And, when we got the 185 applications last year for our first round of grant funding, DC food businesses really want to connect more with, local farms and there is just really this focus on local production and thinking about where your food comes from. But we do have the challenge of the need for, more kind of processing facilities or food hubs. We know that this would create a much more stable marketplace for the grower, encourage more local products, be climate friendly because there was less miles on the food, keep local dollars in the community and increase jobs. Like I said before, Dreaming Out Loud is one of our partners that's really thinking about this intentionally. We also just are seeing right now a huge shift in the food landscape. We're seeing that food businesses and farms that survived the pandemic, some of them are now facing closure because of, inflation, higher costs of food and materials. There's been a huge exodus of workers from the food industry. And so you see businesses really having to pay their workers more, which is great, but can be a challenge for low margin businesses. Like I said before, there's always, from a CDFI perspective, more flexible capital that's needed for financing gaps, especially in these high impact food deals. You really have to anticipate that there's going to be these sorts of gaps, especially we want to focus on entrepreneurs of color who might not have this sort of intergenerational wealth. That's the friends and family money that's a lot of times closes these sorts of gaps in transactions. So, that is always something that we're trying to look for and fundraise for. So yeah, that ends my presentation. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Alison. Yes, we will give folks an opportunity to ask any questions. Feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand or unmute yourself.
Yeah, I had one question for her. My name is Ivy. I'm with the Crossroads Community Food Network. And I wanted her to explain what is the definition of a CDFI and can an organization become one, or do they kind of work with one to be an indirect team, like partner, like the Dreaming Out Louds or something like that?
And a CDFI, in terms of the definition, let me get to my, they can be come in different forms. They could be a bank, a credit union, a loan fund. They're really providing financing and technical assistance with a focus on, economic opportunity and community revitalization. You can become a CDFI. There's a whole application process. You can look it up on the CDFI website. There are some nonprofits that become a CDFI to better serve their community, but there were also sometimes people just partner with CDFIs to, because there is quite a bit of work around becoming a CDFI and then raising the capital. But Eats Place, who's one of our partners in DC, they have a commercial kitchen and they also do a lot of food training. They became a CDFI to give micro loans to some of the food businesses that they're serving. I'd be happy to connect you with them. And they, are doing mostly loans of like $1,000 to $25,000. So pretty small, but they just felt like the food businesses that they were serving needed some capital that was very easy to get. And
now that helps a lot. I worked with the owner of East Place
Katie
in the past. Yeah, she's great.
Yeah.
So that really brings it into perspective. So thank you. Yeah. Perfect.
Thank you for your question, Ivy. And then next up we have Dr. Abdul. You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think part of the question has just been answered by the previous question that was asked. Just thinking of how you can become a CDFI. That's one. And then number two, what are the probability of, for instance, you want to extend your food hub, your food facility capacity, and trying to acquire a plot to build a warehouse and a restaurant and stuff like that. So what are the probability of being able to get those loans?
It really just depends on CDFIs are really built for those sorts of projects, and they can help pull in different sorts of capital and grants. I would say that the initial processes are somewhat similar for any project. You would go to a CDFI with your financials and your business plan and an idea of what the sort of capital needs, and they could assess what they could do for you and what the process would be. I think CDFIs are a lot different than banks because a lot of times they want to know about the project pretty early on and know about your plans, and sometimes can help steer you towards resources or business consultants, or help. They're there to make the project work. They're not there to say no. So yeah, I would say, I'm happy to talk to you offline if you have a specific project in mind and steer you towards a CDFI that might be. It kind of depends on, what size.
That would be great.
Capital needs were.
It would be very great. So you share your contact afterwards, or?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. Anyone else? All right.
May I ask a question? And I just had a question for Steve about some of the MARBIDCO loan instruments. I was just curious if you could talk a little bit more about, and I forget the full title, but the Certified Farm Enterprise Aggregation Distribution Loan, and talk a little bit more about the eligibility requirements for the Certified Local Farm Enterprise. For example, is the Certified Local Farm Enterprise, has to be certain size, of the 4 or so farms of the minimum requirement, do they have to be any particular size or on owned or leased land, or and with the institutional procurement partner or retailer wholesaler partner that must sign on, is there any sort of criteria for that?
Okay, let's start with the Certified Local Farm Enterprises. To become a Certified Local Farm Enterprise, you must have a Maryland Nutrient Management Plan, and you must be in compliance with that plan. And all farmers annually submit reports. As part of that report submission, you can indicate whether you want to be on the list to be contacted by wholesalers and distributors and institutions as to help meet the state's procurement goal. Now, there's a goal of 20% local food procurement currently. So that's it. There's no minimum size or anything. If you're in compliance with Maryland's nutrient management laws and you want to be on the list and in the directory, you're in. So that's the farmer eligibility. So it'd be small, large, whatever. In terms of the requirement for the institutional wholesaler, we obviously, if you're a wholesale business, you know, we know who those are, those institutions are. And generally it's those institutions that have contracts with state agencies, right? So it's going to be the wholesale companies that are going to be helping the state agencies do their procurement purchasing. We have also said that hospital systems would be eligible as well as an institution, so they might be purchasing directly. So again, the purpose of our grant program is, and while we understand retail markets are important, and they're really important to small farmers because that's how they've been able to make a go of it heretofore, we're really trying to build that wholesale and institutional market infrastructure with this grant program. Doesn't mean, you know, those aggregation programs can't serve retail markets, but we really have a focus on the wholesale institutional buyer for eligibility for the grant program. Did that help?
Good to know. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. So if we don't have any more questions for them, thank you to the 3 presenters that we just heard from, and they will put their contact info in the chat box if you have any follow-up questions. And so next up we have our member updates. So we have Kai and Victoria. I believe they're on the call. So whoever would like to go first.
Can we have Victoria go first, Esther, because she has to hop off soon.
Yes, Victoria.
Perfect, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me today and for the great updates and conversation earlier. So just a little bit of background about the Bainham Family Foundation and the Food Security Initiative. So in late 2015, the Bainham Family Foundation was gifted 263 acres of Virginia farmland, where we founded a production farm aimed at supporting food insecure communities in DC. The farm began its work in 2017, and over time we broadened that to supporting off-farm approaches to help address food insecurity through increasing the regional food systems capacity and fostering collaboration between food system stakeholders. In 2018, Tom McDougall and the foundation began discussions regarding the philanthropic funding for Tom's early stage company, 4P Foods. 4P and the Food Security Initiative share mission alignment, both prioritize regenerative agriculture, community education, and regional food pathways, working to build an equitable and just food system. So to complement this work, 4P and the foundation entered into a convertible note with annual interest rate reductions based off of meeting annual programmatic goals. This investment was made in addition to complementary consulting and in-kind support towards HR and operational efficiency, in addition to a contract between 4P and the Bainham Foundation Farm to distribute produce to DC partners. The investment from the foundation provided funding for key infrastructure, technology updates, as well as staffing to increase distribution of healthy foods, with the priority being on Ward 7 and 8 to help food access nonprofits leverage 4P's distribution and logistics capacity and to support knowledge sharing. And while the original investment was structured as a convertible note, in mid-2021, the foundation shifted from a future equity stake to a charitable impact model to encourage 4P's financial growth while also achieving our programmatic and charitable goals as a foundation. So we worked together very closely with 4P to develop activities that advance the goals of the original investment with forgiveness valuations based on impact. And as of earlier this year, 4P had fulfilled the goals and activities, which ranged from establishing a contract with Sodexo Magic to fulfill food distribution orders at DCPS, to providing technical assistance to BIPOC farmers. And the total amount of the loan plus the interest accrued was forgiven. So just a few main takeaways from this investment. 4P has called this investment really catalytic for their growth. And we're thrilled that the early stage investment that we provided fulfilled its purpose of driving operational efficiencies while also meeting programmatic outcomes for the region. Of course, we believe that catalytic capital is an important role for funders to play, filling the gap between grants and traditional investors. We also want to recognize that these type of investments can be very time consuming from an organization and funder perspective. For-profit organizations likely don't have the bandwidth or experience with funder reporting and tracking charitable outcomes, and funders may not have the internal financial infrastructure or staffing to manage the oversight of these investments. And for any funders who are willing or interested in exploring these type of impact investments, we just encourage flexibility, transparent conversations at the onset to determine the best financial vehicle that will help both the organization and the funder achieve their goals. This is one of 2 impact investments that FSI has made during the past 5 years. And due to internal strategy reflections and consideration for the future of the food security initiative, we're not actively soliciting additional opportunities like this, but we encourage anyone interested to, of course, explore the model, growing world of impact investing, and to reach out if you have any questions. And I'll pop my email in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. And next up, we have Kai. And
howdy. Welcome. This is quite exciting. A lot to take in, obviously. My name is Kai. I'll be really brief. I am the sustainability manager at University of Maryland Medical System. We're a small little hospital here in Maryland. I don't know if you've heard of us, but I think we're going to grow. I think we're going to be big at some point. But as a sustainability manager, one of my dreams has been how can we feed not only our patients, our community and our guests, but also our employees fresh vegetables that are grown locally. So long story short, I'm working with Kim Bryden, who is with Curate. We are in the midst of beginning the process of identifying a cooperative board that will help us build and operate a food processing facility here in the city of Baltimore. We've realized that this project is different because we are the institution that wants the fresh vegetables and fruits, and we are actually going to go out and actually work with our community to build a food processing facility in the city of Baltimore, working with not only with our community, but also with the city government who has embraced this. And we're currently looking at opportunities to actually realize and manifest this dream of mine, which is to galvanize local farmers to produce grow great food and then get it processed in our processing facility, and then it gets served in our community. So again, I want to make this short. If there's anybody out there who is at all interested in learning more, or anyone who has tons of money who wants to just throw money at this project, please feel free to reach out. While it's it's our initiative, it is not ours. We want to build a facility that is actually operated and owned by the community. We'll play a role in it, so to speak, but our fingerprints will be light, and we want this to be a gift to our community because we believe this is an important ingredient to identifying food insecurity in our communities, but also more importantly is to just grow good food, right? And grow more good food. And we've heard from a number of farmers that this is the missing ingredient to their processes. And as an institution, we buy, as you're probably well aware, we buy a lot of food, and there are other institutions around town who've also expressed interest in this. So we're going with our eyes wide open, but with Kim Bryden from Curate, I think we're in good hands. And yeah, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. And if anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to reach out, and I'm be more than happy to share the work that we're doing. And thanks for the opportunity, Esther.
Yes, thank you, Kai. That's exciting. Looking forward to hearing about all the progress. All right, and so that concludes our speakers, but if anyone has any last minute comments, questions, we have a few minutes, but if not, thank you again to everyone for attending and just being engaged and asking questions. We really appreciate that. And then again, thank you to Steve, Allison, and Abby for your wonderful presentations. Awesome. Well, We hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks, Esther. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.